Right now, you are training yourself to fail, not once, not in a way you will be able to point to and explain, every single day, in the moments that don't register as significant because they don't feel like failure. They feel like the reasonable behavior of someone doing their best with the conditions available. You plan, you prepare, you structure the intention into something that looks from the outside like someone who has decided to operate differently. And then, without drama, without a clear moment of conscious surrender, you default right back to the pattern that was already there before the planning started. And one of your daily habits, specifically habit number 5, feels exactly like progress. The responsible, self-improving behavior of someone serious about getting better. And it is the precise reason you keep starting over. Most people never see this, but once you do, you cannot unsee it. We'll get there. But first, let's name what is actually happening every day you think you're moving forward while the pattern stays exactly the same. Before we go further, if this resonates with you, just subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. This is daily wisdom for people who are done starting over and ready to stay consistent. Now let's continue. You say you want to be disciplined, focused, consistent. The person whose actions match the standard they set for themselves when nobody was testing it. But your actions, honestly assessed, don't match that person yet. You start things and don't finish them. Not because they were wrong to start, because finishing is where the reward stops being immediate. You make plans and don't follow through, not because the plans were bad, because the plan was the satisfying part. You tell yourself this time is different, and then reproduce the same pattern you've been producing since the last time you said that. That is not a motivation problem. That is a system problem. Fix these 10 habits, and the system changes. You stop negotiating with yourself in the moments the standard is most required. You stop needing to feel ready before you act. You stop restarting from the same position every few weeks, because your life starts running on structure. And structure, unlike motivation, doesn't care how you feel. Habit number 1, win the first hour. Be honest. Most mornings, the first decision you make is not a decision you made consciously. It is a default. The path of least resistance presented itself before you were fully awake, and you followed it, before the part of you that decided to operate differently had time to form the intention. And the first hour is not just the first hour, it is the template. What you do in the first 60 minutes trains the architecture that determines how the rest of the day responds to every choice between easier and harder. You didn't lose your focus at 2 p.m. You lost it in the first unguarded moment, before the day had officially started. Sun Tzu wrote, "Every battle is won before it is fought." Your day works on the same principle. The outcome of the day is largely determined before the day has produced its first difficulty, by the position you chose in the opening hour. Marcus Aurelius documented his morning practice in the Meditations, the private record of someone who understood that governing an empire for 2 decades was a downstream consequence of how the first few minutes of each day were met. At the first light of dawn, tell yourself, "Today I shall encounter meddling, ingratitude, violence, deceit, envy, selfishness. All of them the result of people not knowing what is good. But I have seen the nature of the good, and I will not be harmed." He was not writing a morning affirmation. He was building a preemptive mental structure in the first minutes of each day that determined what everything after it would be operating from, not reacting to what arrived. Already positioned for it. First 60 minutes, no external input of any kind. Sit in silence. Write 3 specific things, not a list, 3 things that would make this day genuinely productive if nothing else happened. Move your body before the day has had time to negotiate with the standard. Take control early, or spend the rest of the day trying to recover it from the position you chose before you were awake. You don't lose your life in the dramatic moments. You lose it in your mornings. Habit number 2, do the hard thing first. There is a moment every single day where you know exactly what needs doing. not approximately, exactly. And in that moment, before the knowing has been acted on, something softer appears, something that provides the sensation of progress without requiring the specific exposure the actual thing demands, and you follow it. Not because you don't know what you're doing, because the easier thing is more immediately available. And in the gap between those two availabilities, the person you are becoming is being decided, one vote at a time. Every time the alarm fires and the negotiation starts, that is a vote. Every time the uncomfortable task gets replaced with something adjacent, that is a vote. Every time the standard bends to accommodate the mood, that is a vote. By the end of the day, across a dozen such moments, you haven't made 12 small choices. You've cast 12 votes for the person you are building. Alexander the Great crossed the Hellespont at 22 with an army vastly outnumbered by what waited on the other side. No extended deliberation, no waiting for conditions to become more favorable, no negotiation with the difficulty of what the moment required. He stepped off the boat first, spear in hand, into enemy territory, not because he wasn't afraid, because he understood that the moment of hesitation, the gap between knowing what is required and doing it, is where the psychological advantage transfers to whoever is willing to act first. The hardest thing on the list goes first, before the mind has had time to construct the argument against it, before the excuses have been rehearsed into something that sounds reasonable, before the distraction has been rationalized into a different priority. Hard choices build the person who can make them. Easy choices build the person who needs them. Habit number 3, control your input. You think the problem is discipline. It isn't. It is what you are feeding your mind in every hour between waking and sleeping, and the specific relationship between what arrives and what you are capable of building from what remains. You have a finite amount of attention in any given day. That attention is the raw material of everything you produce. Every decision, every creative act, every moment of genuine presence in the things that actually matter, and every piece of input that enters your awareness without your having decided whether it deserves to, is spending from that resource without your authorization. Socrates spent his entire life in the most intellectually dense city in the ancient world, surrounded by every form of noise, opinion, and competing framework that Athens could produce. And his documented practice was not the consumption of as many ideas as the environment offered. It was the deliberate examination of which ideas deserved the specific attention that examination required. He said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." He was not writing about philosophical reflection as an intellectual exercise. He was identifying the specific cost of allowing the noise of the world to occupy the space where your own examined thought should live. If what enters your mind arrives without examination, if you consume without choosing, you are not living an examined life. You are living the life the inputs constructed for you. If it doesn't build clarity, it is costing focus. You don't rise above your inputs. You become them. Habit number 4, keep promises to yourself. Every time you say you'll do something and don't, you are not failing a task. You are building a record, a specific, accumulated, internally documented history of yourself as someone whose word to themselves does not hold. Not with other people, to yourself. You plan the day with genuine intention, and then the actual day arrives with its actual conditions, and the plan bends to accommodate what turned up rather than what was decided. And slowly, across the accumulation of bent plans and honored exceptions, the internal record shifts. From someone whose commitment to themselves is absolute, to someone whose commitment to themselves is conditional on conditions remaining comfortable. Ernest Shackleton made a promise to every man who stepped onto the Endurance. When the ship was crushed by pack ice in the Weddell Sea, when every external condition that had supported that promise was gone, he did not renegotiate the commitment on the basis of the changed circumstances. He found a different path to the same destination. 800 miles in an open boat across the most dangerous ocean on the planet. Every crew member survived, not because the conditions were manageable, because the commitment was not conditional on the conditions. Lower the promise before you break it, not because the ambition is wrong, because an unbroken small commitment builds more internal authority than a broken large one. If you said 10 minutes, do 10 minutes. The minutes are not the point. The record is. Habit number 5, the one most people never see coming. This is the habit, the one running quietly underneath every restart, every attempt, every period where the intention was real and the outcome was the same. You sit down and engage with content specifically designed to produce the feeling of progress. A video about discipline, a framework about execution, a system for the gap between where you are and where you intend to be, and something specific happens in your brain. It produces the same neurochemical signal it produces when you actually do the thing the content describes, because the brain cannot fully distinguish between the reward of learning and the reward of doing. So you feel progress, genuine, convincing, completely real progress. Without producing a single output the world outside you can verify. That is not improvement. That is the consumption of improvement in the place of its production. And it is why you keep restarting. Not because the information wasn't good, because the information gave your brain the reward that was supposed to come from acting on it. So the acting never became as urgent as it needed to be. Napoleon Bonaparte did not build the most dominant military force in European history through preparation alone. He was documented as the fastest decision-maker of his era, not because his information was always complete, but because he understood that a decision made with 80% of the information executed immediately outperforms a perfect decision made too late to matter. He said, "Take time to deliberate, but when the time for action has come, stop thinking and go in." The preparation is not the product, the execution is. For every hour spent consuming content about what needs to change, one output, not a plan for the output, not a note about the output itself, something that exists in the world outside you that did not exist before you made it. If it doesn't turn into something produced, it is not self-improvement. It is the feeling of it. Resource segment. And here is where most people stop. Not because the understanding isn't real, because understanding delivered as content, however precisely it lands, is still subject to the exact mechanism, habit number 5 just named. Your brain has already produced a reward signal from watching this, which means the urgency to act on it is already lower than it was when you began. Structure is what keeps the understanding available in the moment the default is competing with it. I built one system for that gap, the 30-day mental discipline system. Not more noise, not more distraction, just daily structure that turns understanding into how you operate at the level below thought. It's in the description. 5 habits left, the ones most people never reach. Habit number 6, eliminate decision fatigue. You are not lazy, you are depleted. And the depletion started before the real work did, in the dozens of small decisions that consumed the same resource the work requires. What to prioritize, what to eat, what to address first, from the accumulation that all arrived labeled urgent. By the time the real work appears, the resource it needs has already been partially spent on decisions that could have been made in advance, defaulted to a structure, or eliminated entirely. Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day, not as a personal statement, not as a brand, as a documented, deliberate elimination of one daily decision that consumed the same cognitive resource as every other decision, and produced nothing of value that the resource spent on it could not have produced somewhere that actually mattered. He understood that the mind is not unlimited, that the quality of the 10th decision of the day is not the same as the quality of the first, and that every decision removed from the daily total protects the resource for the ones that cannot be removed. Unstoppable people don't make more decisions than everyone else. They waste fewer. Structure the sequence of your day in advance. What gets decided before the day begins does not drain the resource during it. Protect the energy the real work requires. Habit number 7. Track your reality. You believe you are working hard. You experience yourself as someone putting in the effort the outcome requires, and the outcome is not matching that experience, not because you're wrong about the effort, because effort and output are not the same thing. And without a daily, honest, specific account of what actually happened, the gap between them stays invisible, and what stays invisible doesn't get addressed. It just runs the pattern while you believe something else is running it. Isaac Newton kept meticulous records of every experiment, every observation, every result that contradicted his current understanding. Not selectively, everything, because he understood that the result you don't record is the result you cannot learn from. And the gap in the record is always filled by the assumption that was most comfortable, rather than the observation that was most accurate. Track one thing every day. The specific thing, the outcome you want, is most directly a function of time on the work, tasks completed, hours of genuine focus. Whatever it is, measure it with the same precision you would apply to anything else you were genuinely serious about improving. You cannot improve what you refuse to see. Habit number 8. Create silence. You are never genuinely alone with your own thinking. There is always something arriving. Audio, visual, the ambient noise of a world architecturally committed to ensuring that the silence where your own thought lives is filled with something it generated rather than something you chose. And without genuine silence, without the daily, deliberately protected absence of external input, you don't gain clarity. You gain the processed feeling of having consumed enough input that the processing itself feels like thinking. Leonardo da Vinci valued stillness as a working condition, not as rest, not as the absence of productivity, but as the specific state in which the observations he had accumulated could be examined without the noise of new input competing with what was already there. His notebooks document thousands of observations developed in silence, ideas returned to, turned over, examined from different angles. In the deliberate absence of the external stimulation that would have replaced the examination with consumption. 10 minutes, no input, no output required, no agenda. Just you, alone with what is actually in your mind rather than what the world placed there while you weren't paying attention. Silence builds clarity, and clarity determines whether the effort goes in the right direction. Habit number 9. Close your day with intention. The night does not just end the day, it sets the architecture of the one that follows. What you consume in the hours before sleep, the emotional register you are operating in when the brain begins consolidating the day's experience, determines what tomorrow begins with. Most people end the day in the same default they began it, whatever required the least effort, no review, no account. No deliberate positioning of the mind for what tomorrow requires. Marcus Aurelius ended every day with 3 questions, documented in the Meditations as the specific practice that prevented the same errors compounding across days, weeks, and years. Where did I fall short? What did I do? What did I leave undone? Not self-punishment, not the rehearsal of failure as a way of suffering through the day that passed. The practical, forward-pointing examination of what the day revealed, so that tomorrow begins from an honest position rather than the comfortable fiction that everything is fine and different results will arrive without different inputs. Ask 3 questions before sleep. What did I do well today? What needs to change tomorrow? What am I carrying that belongs to yesterday and not tomorrow? A controlled night creates a powerful morning. Not because the morning is determined by the night, because the mind that went to sleep with a clear account of what happened wakes up with a clearer one of what to do next. Habit number 10. Become the person. Everything tonight has been about behavior, but underneath the behavior, underneath the morning and the hard thing first, and the controlled input and the kept promise, is the identity that determines whether the behavior is being performed or whether it is being lived. And the distance between those two things is the entire explanation of why some people restart every few weeks and some people don't. You act based on who you believe you are, not what you intend, not what you know, who you believe you fundamentally are, at the level below the plan, below the intention, below the version of yourself you present when conditions are favorable. If the identity at that level is someone who is inconsistent, every habit will be maintained until the conditions make not maintaining it the easier option. Every restart will restart from the same position, because the identity that produced the pattern was never addressed. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step." He was not writing about uncertainty. He was writing about the specific commitment of someone who has decided who they are and acts from that identity before the full picture is available, before the conditions confirm it, before the evidence has caught up with the decision. You don't become the disciplined person when the discipline starts producing visible results. You become the disciplined person when you decide you are, and act from that in the ordinary moments where nobody is watching and the decision is entirely yours. Decide who you are, then act from that. Not once, not when conditions make it easy. Every day, in the small moments, as the specific, daily accumulating evidence of someone who has stopped negotiating with their own standard. 10 habits, none requiring a perfect day, none requiring conditions to be favorable, none requiring a version of you that is fully formed before beginning. They require the ordinary commitment of someone who has decided the standard applies today, in this day as it actually is. Win the first hour. Do the hardest thing first. Control what enters your mind. Keep the promise you made to yourself. Produce instead of consume. Protect the resource the real work requires. Track what is actually happening. Create silence. Close the day with an account. Act from the identity of the person you have decided to become. That accumulation, daily, unremarkable, invisible to everyone watching, is what unstoppable is actually built from. Not motivation, not the dramatic decision that changes everything overnight. Small actions, repeated daily, that don't just change what you do, they decide who you become. If this named the pattern you've been inside, send it to someone still in the restart cycle. Someone who keeps beginning again from the same position because the habits underneath the intention were never addressed. And in the comments, 2 words, I'm building, not I'm motivated, not I'm starting again, I'm building, as the declaration of someone already in the process. One ordinary day, one unbroken commitment, one unremarkable decision at a time. Subscribe for daily wisdom that builds this one habit at a time. If you're ready to build real discipline, unshakable mental discipline, the 30-day mental discipline system, and the daily Stoic reset pack are all available as resources in the description. Small actions, repeated daily, they decide who you become.